Assalamualaikum everyone, this is Ayesha from CxO Global Forum, a knowledge sharing platform for all the C levels across Pakistan and around the globe. Every time we're having some very interesting guests with us, but today we have this very, I would say, an active member of us joining us today for this interview. We have Ms. Sahar Iqbal with us, who is the partner at Akhund Forbes. Assalamualaikum, ma'am, how are you?
Walaikum salam. I'm well. Thank you for organizing this podcast today, I guess.
It's a pleasure, sir, ma'am. Okay, so it is 11 a.m. in Pakistan now. How is your day so far?
It's Friday, so it's a little relaxed so far. Yesterday was a bit busy, but today's okay. So it's manageable, which is why we're speaking right now.
Right, okay. So, ma'am, before we start off with this conversation, I would want you to please let our audience know who basically Miss Sahar Iqbal is.
Um, I think Sahar is, well, she's a person and she's also a lawyer. So, for the most part of her adult life, she's been a lawyer. That's been her main identity. Um, I think as a person, it's something very individual and personal, right? So, I think Sahar is a lawyer. She's been a lawyer for 15 years, mashallah. She
Right,
studied law for I think another 5 years before that. So 20, 21 years of my life, most of my life has been about law. And I
right.
think that's probably going to be the case for the rest of my life, inshallah.
Right, right. Okay. So, ma'am, I would want to ask here what initially drew your attention to pursue a career in law, and how did your journey lead to become a partner here at Akhund Forbes?
Well, I think like most children in Pakistan, my so I was brought up by my grandparents, my maternal grandparents. My parents live next door, so they're my neighbors. They've been my neighbors my whole life. But I was
Right,
the eldest grandchild, and I was brought up by my grandparents because my mother was the only daughter. So my grandfather was a doctor. He had studied medicine, and I think, he initially wanted me to pursue the same field. And I think for until we had to choose subjects in our O levels, I probably also wanted to be a doctor. But then I was always very inspired by Qaid Azam, who isn't. So when the time came to actually choose my career path, I sort of informed my family that I wanted to be a lawyer. I actually wanted to be a politician, but that's not possible. I mean, I don't think that's a very feasible profession in our country, and rightly so, as we're seeing. So the next best thing was a lawyer or a social worker, right? Because again, a
right,
social worker is something very formal in our society, and back in the day, like 20 years ago or something. So I think lawyer was a good profession, and I wanted to be a barrister. Actually, I wanted to do the bar from the same place where Qaida Azam did his bar from. So that,
right.
it sounds very cliched, that's what every lawyer says, but that's true for me at least.
Okay, right. So, ma'am, I would want to ask, you might have faced many challenges in your journey. So, what were those challenges that you encountered, early on your legal career, and how did you overcome them?
I love. I mean, I enjoyed studying. So I was always, yes. There was, again, like most typical Pakistani South Asian parents. There was this pressure of doing well, excelling in your studies, achieving good grades. So there was always that pressure and expectation. But then I also enjoyed studying, and I think one of the reasons why I studied law was because I enjoyed studying the subject. I also wanted to do philosophy or something in comparative religion. That was also my interest. But again, that's not a very formal field or profession in Pakistan. Maybe if I
Mhm.
were in some other country, I would have done something in theology.
Definitely
Um,
right.
so I think as far as student life as a lawyer was concerned, I enjoyed it. I love studying law. But the problem was when I graduated. This was 2008, 2009. So I
Right.
graduated, did my bar, came back. at that time the first lawyers movement had happened in the country. So half of the lawyers were in jail. But I was also very proud to be a lawyer at that time, because for the first time the civil society had stood up against, I don't want to get too political, but they had defended their
Right.
rights, and lawyers were very, they were looked up, right? A lot of people looked up at lawyers at that time. But the problem was, two things were happening. There was
Mhm.
a global recession, so there was a
Right.
global stock market crash, etc. The economy was not doing well anywhere, well, in most of the countries in the world. And the second thing in Pakistan was that the lawyers had taken up, they stood up against the government, etc. And half the lawyers were in jail. There was very little vacancy. Now, the other thing is, when you're a lawyer, there are two questions. Do you want to go to the courts? Do you want to be a litigator, or do you want to be a corporate lawyer? In
Right.
Pakistan, there is no requirement for you to be either one or the other. If you're in England, you can either be a barrister or a solicitor. I mean, there's some, now it's become a little easy. You can do a little bit of both. So that's what I had to choose. I became a lawyer, I became a barrister because I wanted to go to the courts. But then I realized, when I finished my education, came back, I realized that I would not enjoy going to the courts day in, day out. Aisha, can you still hear me?
Mhm. Yes, definitely I can.
So that was I think that was the first, and I'm a first generation lawyer. So I don't have first generation lawyer and one of the first female lawyers. So I didn't really have anyone in friends or family to guide me. But
Right.
I realized that perhaps corporate law would be more feasible, coming from the family background that I did. Because my family is traditional and they're old school and a little conservative, so they weren't very comfortable sending me to courts, and we hear about
Right.
a lot of things, right? And I wasn't very comfortable either. But I thought corporate law would be boring. Let's join. Let's see what happens. So when I was looking, I had a good CV. So I've had a good academic background and record. So I have good grades, which meant that getting a job should have been easy. But the problem was, there weren't a lot of jobs available at that time, especially in the
Okay.
corporate sector, because the corporate sector in Pakistan is small. There are a lot of
Mhm.
lawyers who go to the court, but the vacancy in corporate law firms is not that much. And even at that time, because the country was
Right.
going through a recession,
Right.
so the firm that I'm currently at, the firm I've been at all my life, they had just, I mean, something's happened by luck, or
Understood. I guess there's an internet connection
sorry.
disrupted.
Yeah, sorry, the
Okay.
connection is quite poor.
No
Let me
worries.
just have. So the law firm that I'm currently working at, they had opened up at that time. They were originally, so the founders were originally from Pakistan. They were Pakistani lawyers, but they were one of the very, very few Pakistani lawyers who had worked abroad. So they
Right.
had basically established their practice by working in some of the leading law firms in the world. And
Right.
some part of me wanted to work at a good global law firm. But I was always I was always very tied to my roots and to my family and to my home in Pakistan. So that's one of the reasons I came back. Otherwise, maybe I would have stayed back after completing my education in the UK. I would have stayed back, looked for a job, but I was very
Right.
naive. I wanted to come back to my country, come back to my family and friends. So anyway, I joined the firm, and they were very professional. They were different from others. The kind of training that I got was different from what happens in Pakistani law firms.
Definitely
I
right.
think I think the initial struggle every young lawyer faces is to learn the practical side of things. And law is one
Mhm.
profession where, no matter how good a student you are, you need to pick things practically. You need to learn how to deal
Right.
with clients. You need to understand the economy, the market, what's happening in industry. You need to understand your client's business, and you can do that by by being trained, by looking at your seniors, and also by having a lot of uh, strength and dedication to your profession. There's a
Definitely.
lot of personal sacrifice. There's a lot of personal sacrifice. So I think as an associate, being a young lawyer wasn't a challenge in itself. What was challenging was continuing on the trajectory, right? Continuing to grow, because you can't be at one place for the rest of your life.
Definitely right.
Now, so I think initially, and not just for law, for any student, for any young employee, anybody, a fresh graduate, there needs to be commitment over and beyond. I'm not glorifying. I mean, I'm not saying you need to be a workaholic. You don't need to have a personal life, but it does
100%.
require. I mean, there are days when you skip lunch because you have to be at your table. You have to work. You have to miss out on social commitments because you're
Yeah,
staying late.
100% right.
Uh, and also, I think I came from a very sheltered uh, home environment, right? So from home to school to professional life, and then by nature I'm a little thin-skinned and sensitive. So you're dealing with people. So there's both a professional and a personal aspect that you need to learn and
Definitely
overcome.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, ma'am, I would want to ask here, how do you manage between your personal life and your professional life?
I think initially the first few years, you're young, you have a lot of energy, you can do both. I used to come back late and then, meet friends, go out. But then as responsibility increased, because what happened was one of our founding partners, he had to go back to Australia. He works for the government of Australia. He had to go back, and I had to take over a lot of responsibilities and a lot of work that he was doing. And it was at a very young age. I was in my mid 20s. So when that responsibility came, the only way I could really do justice to it was because I knew I wasn't fully experienced or trained, right? So the only way I could do justice was to completely immerse myself in my job.
Right.
So it did become, all consuming. Because I think and there's also a lot of liability for lawyers, for doctors, for accountants. There's a lot of liability. If, God
Definitely
forbid,
right.
you give a wrong advice, then not just on you, but on the entire firm.
Definitely.
And the kind of work we were doing with domestic and international clients, there was a lot of my neck was on the block all the time. So sleepless nights, lots of stress, always checking emails and double checking stuff. Um, it There was a point when it became a little difficult to manage both. I mean, there was a time when I was working around the clock throughout, but I liked it, right? I enjoyed it because it's work. You're being productive. Um, I mean, yes, I did miss out on some commitments, etc. But that's okay. You have to do what you have to do, right? It's a choice that you have to make.
Definitely right. 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 Okay. So, ma'am, I would want to ask, what skills or qualities do you believe personally that one should have to be, successful in the legal field?
Okay, you need to study hard.
Okay.
You need to have a lot of dedication and commitment,
Right.
and you need to be and you need to learn, right? Even right now, for lawyers, you are learning every single day.
Right.
Even if you are 70 years old, 80 years old, and you've been working for all of your life, you need to learn. uh, and there it requires a lot of hard work.
Okay. Right. So, ma'am, one question that I would want to ask here is this legal field a competitive industry?
I think in Pakistan right now, every industry is competitive and legal. So, good question. The legal field has become extremely competitive during the last few years, and I'll give you an example. When I graduated, the
Mhm.
class strength of my class, graduating class, was less than 15 students.
Right,
Right now, from what I hear, 700 students are graduating from one law school. So, do you see how competitive it has become? And the
right.
other thing is, our economy is not growing the way it should. It's shrinking, it has shrunk.
Definitely right.
So, yes, it's very competitive. But then,
So, ma'am, sorry,
I'll just add one thing.
sure,
So, even if you have a lot of students and applicants for the job, not everybody can hit the mark, right? So
definitely right.
it's quality over quantity.
Okay, right. So, ma'am, I would want to ask here. So, how do you, stay motivated and you stay ahead of the time in such a competitive and evolving field? I would say.
Good question. I think until pandemic, until say 2020, 2021, I was probably the most motivated person in the world. And people used to ask me, where do you get your motivation and energy
Mhm.
from? I don't drink tea or coffee, so I don't get my energy from energy drinks or tea or coffee. I think it was the people I work with. They
Right.
motivated me every single day, every hour of the day. I wanted to work with them. I enjoyed working with them, whether it was my colleagues, my seniors, or my clients. And I think also the feeling of being productive. And why did I become a lawyer? I didn't become a lawyer for myself. I became a lawyer because I wanted to help people, right? Law
Definitely.
has all law, nursing, doctor, they've always been known to be calling rather than a business or profession. So for me,
Definitely.
it it's never been a commercial pursuit. It's never been a business. It's never been about making money. It's always been a field where I can help people. As I said, I wanted to be a politician or a
Right.
social worker. So I think that's
Definitely.
also the motivation. And I'll just add one thing. A lot of times, there was, there was work and I had to do it because there weren't too many people around to do the work. But now when I
Right.
feel that this work can be done by a lot of other people, then I step back. I mean, let others do it. So
Mhm.
I think there
Right.
needs to be a little bit of give and take.
Right. Okay. So, ma'am, I would want you to please, give an advice to the people who are aspiring their career in this industry.
Um, Study hard, get a lot of practical experience, do as many internships as you can. And when you're applying for a job, this is something I did, apply everywhere, right? We can't be choosy, we can't be picky right now. And once you start working, don't work with the intention of leaving. I personally, I've only had one job all of my life. So straight from law school, I joined this firm, and
Right.
I mean, there were times when I did consider whether I should move for better prospects, but for one reason or the other, I stayed. And even during the last few years when things became a little slow, you keep thinking, right? But it and this is more to do with me as a person. I don't like moving around. I don't like to fix things which are
Right.
not broken. So be dedicated and committed, and be selfless. It's very important to be selfless. A
Definitely
lot of
right.
people, I just feel that the society has become very self-absorbed. I mean,
Definitely right.
I don't mean to generalize, but be selfless. um, Try giving, try helping others.
Right. Thank you for these advices, ma'am. Lastly, how would you describe your experience with CXO Global Forum?
It's great. I somebody had mentioned CxO to me. Was it last year or the year before that? and it's very different from my field because I see more IT professionals here. But I thought might as
Right.
well join. It's been such a wonderful community. Um, I'm pleasantly surprised. I mean, it's been great. The people are great. So it's I'm very glad I joined, and it's one of the very few forums and communities in Pakistan which actually are for their members, right? Because what we see is normally a lot of founders establish these communities and it's about the founders only. But this community believes in giving back, which is what I'm seeing. So I can align with the ethics and ethos of the community.
Okay, thank you for your feedback, ma'am. Done with this short interaction here. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that our viewers would be able to learn from you as much as possible. It was lovely talking to you and hearing from you. And once again, thank you for pulling out time for this discussion.
Thank you, Aisha. Have a good day.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Take care.